Here on Views from the Mountaintop, though we reach the top of the mountain, there's always another one to climb. So, Philly Phil, thank you for joining me today. I appreciate you being here, taking the time out of your schedule to come tell some folks about the legal profession, your particular journey, and how that came about. So, I pretty much wanted to start from your early academic career. So, going from high school into college. I know that you went to UC Berkeley for undergrad and studied economics. So, what was the idea behind that and the motivation coming out of high school? What made you want to study economics?
Yeah. Well, first off, thank you, Chris, for putting me onto this. I'm excited to do this. This will be a really fun conversation. I did go to UC Berkeley for economics. I actually came in as a third year transfer. So spent
Mm.
2 years, freshman and sophomore year of college at Sierra College, which is the local community college in my hometown. Graduated from high school and had the motivation to go into economics based on a senior year class in macroeconomics in high school. So I was enrolled in AP Macro Econ, and I always like to tell the story to people who are aspiring to go into economics or they have a certain passion in the academic world and maybe they find it somewhat challenging. I take AP Macro Econ and I feel like I'm crushing it. I am showing up to class. I'm, doing all the work, and I get home and I'm like, homework's easy. The tests feel good. So I'm putting my hands back behind my head. I'm relaxing before the AP Macro Econ test. I take the test. I walk out, feel pretty good. I'm feeling okay, and I get my results, whatever it is, 6 weeks later, and I get a one. And for those who know about the AP test score
Yeah.
brackets, you have a score from 1 to 5. And I was told as a high school student that to get a one, you had to forget what your name was. You had to forget the date. You had to forget to sign something at the bottom. That merely by showing up and bubbling in some answers, writing something down, you get a two. So I got a one on that AP Macro Econ test. At this point, I had already signed up for my freshman classes in college, and I was enrolled in a macro econ course. And I was like, well, I'm signed up now, and classes in college are so hard to get into. I was like, I'm not changing. This is my schedule, so we're going to roll with it. And ended up doing much better in college. And as I rolled through, really loved the economic discipline and loved what I was getting from that experience. But being in high school and having that AP experience, I took a lot of AP honors courses in high school, so it set me up well to go into college, and loved that macro econ course in high school. It just carried over. So when I got into Sierra College, I took all the very basic fundamental econ courses, macro and micro econ in particular, and then took all the rest of the GEs. Get to Berkeley, and it becomes another level. It's another game there. So the step up in competition was what I think a lot of people say about the jump from high school athletics to college athletics, and college to pro athletics, where you think you're good, and then all of a sudden you're running into something that feels just infinitely more difficult. So I get into my third year at undergrad at Berkeley, and I'm taking intermediate macro theory, and I'm taking the final. And my Professor Wood, in this giant lecture hall of 600 people, however many of us there are, he stops the exam 2 minutes in, and he says, "Hey, everyone, just remember, you are a closed economy. No importing or exporting answers from your neighbor." And I am panicked because I am thinking, what question is that for? I don't, where do I, is that, do I need to write that down on the margin? Can I write that down? Am I supposed to? And it took me a second to realize, okay, he's just telling us not to cheat. Okay, we're good. So there was a lot for me getting into economics that was not just challenging from the actual, like, uh, you know, the actual subject matter, but it was a lot of going to a big university and having to overcome a lot of the barriers that come with being in a 600-person lecture hall, kind of just being on your own, having to figure it out for yourself. If you need help, you got to go ask for it. And I think what's cool about economics is that it's about finding answers to really difficult questions that maybe don't have super straightforward answers. There isn't necessarily something you can box at the end. 2 plus 2 is 4. Put a highlighter around that. That's your answer. A lot of economics is, well, we get this answer if we do this. We get that answer if we do that. And I loved that variability. And I loved being able to sit down in an exam style setting and work my way through a problem, knowing that, hey, there's probably another way to get to this, but I'm going to stick with my answer and see what I get. A circuitous answer, a lot of different things, but just love the variability I got with economics, and the persistence that I had as I came into college really motivated me to just keep going with it, even if I wasn't necessarily hitting home runs from the beginning.
Nice. And that is actually not the perspective that I thought I was gonna get. So it's amazing to get to learn a little bit more about you and your journey actually, because I know you from my perspective as someone who's fairly academically inclined, someone who does fairly well. So it's interesting, but I obviously met you past all those things, right? After the accomplishments. So I met you post the struggle and didn't get a chance to understand that. So that's cool to hear a little bit about your journey and how you persevered through that. So what was kind of the emotional uh part to that as you were, you know, kind of stumbling through this? The AP test didn't go as well, but you're like, hey, I'm still sticking with it, and then you persevere through some of those junior college classes, and then you go to Berkeley, and then you're feeling a little nervous about the rigor and the competition that there is there. So how are you like emotionally navigating that and still staying with it?
Yeah, it's something that I think gets discounted a lot when we talk about college or we talk about academic experiences. There's admittedly a perfectly rational and reasonable basis for focusing all of your attention on the performance and how difficult the classes are and how much you're learning and in what amount of time and all that kind of stuff. And I think we don't pay enough attention to the maturation process that a lot of people go through in college, and giving people tools and resources to navigate that. As someone who went to high school with a fairly close knit group of friends, many of whom went away to 4-year universities right after high school, very few people had gone to the community college, at least that were in my friend group. So I was kind of on my own there. For most of my first 2 years in undergrad at Sierra College, I was working part time. So there was a lot from an emotional perspective of just like, I want to move forward. I want to do my best here so that I can get to the next place, which was transferring to some UC, hopefully just some 4-year university somewhere, but also wanting to make sure I have enough money to fill up my gas tank and make sure that I can get to where I'm going, and make sure I have enough money on the side to do some fun stuff here and there. So a lot of it was checking in with myself as needed. I like to think I'm someone who works pretty hard to keep myself as disciplined as possible. So for me, a lot of the emotional toll was kept in check by just being as focused as I could be on creating a plan for myself on a daily, weekly basis, which sounds kind of crazy and absurd, but that's what I did as much as humanly possible. And on top of creating a schedule, which I think helped alleviate a lot of the emotional burden of sort of like, okay, instead of thinking about the insurmountable amount of work you have to do over a semester, just what are you doing today? Or what's due this week? What's the next exam? We're game planning for that. We're strategizing for that. Don't get into the existential downward spiral of, okay, I need to ace this test so I can get this grade in this class so that I can get this particular GPA in my major so that I can transfer. If you start doing that, I feel like it gets really overwhelming. And in addition to the mindset part of it being in class, I think it was huge for me to have other outlets. I continued to be a part of different athletic stuff that I enjoyed during my first 2 years. In particular, I was involved in a running community. So just finding space and time to get away from that stuff. As much as I love the academic world, I feel like at times it can be overbearing. And so emotionally, you have to remove yourself from that, do something else with your time, turn your mind off a little bit. When I transferred, it became a little harder just because as a transfer, a lot of people I think who are transfers can attest it. It's a little bit harder to make friends. Most people come in to their junior year, they've already got a good base of friends. They already have their core network from freshman, sophomore year. You're just the person who happens to sit next to them and lecture. They're not really interested in adding new friends to their group. And you come in, at least at Berkeley, in most majors with another academic hurdle, which is you have to basically qualify for your major. So although you transferred in and you got admitted, they could easily kick you out of the major that you applied for if you don't succeed at a high enough level your first 1 and 2 semesters while you're there. So there was a lot of that. Admittedly, I leaned on a lot of family and friends back in Sacramento. Berkeley is not too far down the road, about an hour and a half. And I spent a lot of time going back and forth on weekends because I was struggling to connect on a social level. Once I transferred, only making a few friends my first semester or two, I really relied on going back to Sacramento and connecting with the network I already had there to make sure that I could remove myself. And personally, I found that valuable to alleviate some of the emotional stress of being in that hyper competitive academic environment day in and day out. For me, that was instrumental. I think it was very helpful. And when I was there at Berkeley, I was putting my nose down and I was working as hard as I could, but I did allow myself that space to be somewhere else, which for me that's a really good way to emotionally detach, is to not just turn on TV or turn on, stare at my phone. It's like to physically move somewhere else. And I think for me, even if it's just a weekend back at home with my sister or with some friends, it really helped to alleviate some of that emotional stress that I was feeling and the pressure I was feeling once I transferred in.
Nice. That sounds really well-rounded. Do you think you would have had that same well-rounded perspective if you had went to a 4-year directly from high school, or do you think you need that time to develop a little bit in the junior college space?
It's a really good question. Yeah, I mean, I think I, quite honestly, I don't think I needed it. Uh, I do think I was someone who, from an early-ish age, I had a little more independence. I realized than a lot of my friends. My parents were a little more laissez-faire with my social life in high school, so I felt like I could depend on myself to figure out answers to things. I could sort of navigate, do what I want when I wanted. Um, but I think it definitely helped to be in an environment where, at least for me, it was beneficial to have the family and friends and have that network around you. I think what was challenging and difficult for me to think about going straight to a 4 year is the idea of you lose that network almost instantly, and it becomes incumbent upon you to build a new one basically from scratch. And certainly, you have the social lubricants of a dorm room and a food hall and the intramural sports to help you do that. For me, honestly, that just felt like a kind of a big challenge. I'd initially actually committed to going to UC Santa Barbara out of high school, and ended up rescinding that decision to go there. I think in hindsight, I look back and honestly, I just wasn't ready for that level of independence. I wasn't ready to just drop every network that I had and the closeness I was both in physical proximity and emotional connection to my family members in Sacramento to run down to Isla Vista and basically start from scratch. I just felt like I wasn't really ready for that. So it worked out for me where going to Berkeley gave me enough space to get that independence, but then also allowed me the proximity to still have what I felt was a comfort for me to get through that. And honestly, a lot of my friends, it made me feel at the time somewhat unique because a lot of my friends were people who were like, I can't wait to get away from home as soon as I can. I'm going away to a 4 year. And I had friends going to many different parts of the country. And I was like, well, that seems to really work for those people. What's wrong with me? Why don't I want those same things? I feel like that doesn't sound exciting to me. It sounds really kind of scary. And so there was a lot of self-doubt, at least initially. And I think once I transferred and proved to myself that I could do it in a way that worked for me and that there wasn't necessarily one correct way to do it, really helped me feel a lot better as I finished my undergrad career.
Nice. Yeah, I'm glad that you had the maturity and the wherewithal to look within yourself and see the right path for you. I think a lot of times people are just trying to check the boxes of what they think they should be doing, where they think they should be going, what their parents want them to do, the place that their parents are pushing them to go, following their friends and the moves that they're making. So I think it's great that you stood on your own and kind of figured that out for yourself and chose your own path. And obviously that ended up working out for the best. So that's great. So just pivoting a little bit, you did take a little bit of a break before going into law school. Is that correct?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
So there was about a 2 year gap for me. Graduated undergrad and took my first job post undergrad at a real estate consultancy out in San Francisco. And that job was basically just sit behind a desk at Microsoft Excel, download a bunch of US Census data, and do a bunch of Excel formulas to get to a bunch of numbers that matter to people who are developing primarily multifamily residential properties. So I learned a lot about how to use Microsoft Excel and a lot about how in the business world, people care about the bottom line. They really weren't interested in all the nuanced analysis that I had lined up, all the work I was doing about demographic trends and job market fluctuations in Charlotte, North Carolina, and which residential pockets of Charlotte are growing. They kind of were just like, hey man, we want to build apartments in Charlotte. All I need you to tell me is what I can charge on a per square foot basis if I build these apartments to let me know if it's profitable or not. I was like, oh, okay, I got it. So you don't care about the other stuff. Are you sure? I worked really hard on the other stuff. Um, and after doing that for a little while, quite honestly, it goes back to the college portion of things where just didn't really feel at home in San Francisco. Didn't feel like I was building the kind of life or the network that I wanted. Felt like from a personal perspective, it was hard to do the things I enjoyed, to be physically active, to travel. It just felt like everything was a lot more cumbersome. So I ended up taking a job back in Sacramento, my hometown, working for a local bank there, doing basically business analysis. I'm looking at mortgage files and I'm helping the bank figure out whether or not these mortgage files are, in air quotes, good value. Are we getting good value for the money that we are putting into generating these loan files? Are these worthy credit applicants? Are they making their payments? If they are not, how can we consolidate the debt, try and do something different to make sure that they pay their mortgages off? And it was at that point where I'm at this job for probably a year, and I go on to the job. My job had this like internal portal, which many jobs do, where you can see your position, your supervisor, your review date, all that kind of stuff. And I looked at it and I had this epiphany that there's only one person above me in my job. My direct report was the vice president of real estate services. And I realized, if I stay at this job, I'm just going to have to wait to become that guy. There's basically nowhere for me to go if I stay here. I just become this guy at some point when he decides he wants to retire. And from a from a career perspective, he was relatively young. He was in his early to mid 40s, so he probably had a solid 15 plus years to go. And for me, it was kind of like, do I want to do this for 15 years? And my answer was no. I just didn't feel like I had the growth opportunities and developments in that space, and didn't really feel like I had a super great network. A lot of my coworkers were not in my age bracket. A lot of the environment there was not necessarily what I was looking for from sort of an academic challenge perspective. And one of my buddies, one of my really close friends from middle school, had just started at law school in New York at Fordham. And I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. I don't know. Maybe I just look at that. And then a few months later, I found out another buddy from high school had started or was going to enroll that upcoming fall in law school at Temple. And I was like, okay, that sounds like something I really want to do now. And certainly I'm not going to sit here and pretend the social persuasion didn't help. I was someone who, this core group of friends from middle school, high school, really got me to where I was academically. And I was like, well, maybe that's something I need to look at too. So I started to dig into what I needed to do to go to law school, signed up for an LSAT prep course, and started off that LSAT prep course by being god awful, as I was at most standardized tests. And I was like, maybe I don't do this. Maybe I don't know, maybe I'll go get like a personal trainer certificate and see if 24-hour fitness got any jobs. And ultimately, I decided to stick with my LSAT prep course, and saw some improvement, and ended up taking the LSAT twice, using my higher score the second time to supplement my application at UC Davis School of Law, and was lucky and really ecstatic that I got the acceptance. I think February of 2017, I then enrolled and matriculated August of 2017 at law school in Davis, and that was one of my best and favorite academic experiences for sure.
Well, honestly, I think you would have still had a thriving career at the gym, training folks at the 24. I could definitely see you at the counter, just kind of bouncing back and forth, like, "Hey, what's going on, man? You need yeah, you need yeah, exactly." So, I think you would have flourished there as well. But I'm glad that that you stuck with it and end up finishing up at UC Davis. So why was that your favorite um, chunk of your academic career?
Yeah, it's something that is hard to explain because I think the academic experience itself was not only outstanding, and I not only felt like I learned a lot, but I really did feel like from a community perspective, both professors, administrators, peers, just everyone at the school just made the experience that much better. And what was amazing was not only to like dig into subject matter, it wasn't just the topical undergrad experience where you're going through a whatever it is 16-week semester course in insert topic here, and you go so superficially over this wide swath of material that you don't actually get to dig into why things are and challenge some of the ideas. It's a lot of just digest a bunch of information, try and spit it back out on a final exam. And I felt like in law school there was definitely some of that. At least at the beginning, the first year of law school is very intense academically. It's very rigorous, very challenging portion of the law school experience, but the latter 2 years are much easier, and they give you an opportunity to dig into different subject matter and material that's interesting to you. And I just felt like the professors put in a lot of effort. A place like Davis is not a super highly ranked institution. In law schools, there is this ranking. T14 is what it's called, top 14, basically a US News and World Report ranking system where the top
Mm.
14 schools are kind of in their own category. You then drop down below that, and that's kind of seen as like a second tier. I would say colloquially that ends somewhere about 25 or 30, and then Davis is somewhere in that, at least during my time, we Davis was somewhere in the like low 30s, 31, 32, 33 area for most of my 3 years there. So it wasn't this hyper competitive, crazy, insane academic experience that a couple of my friends who went to Stanford Law, Duke Law, they experienced that intensity that I think was analogous to my academic experience in undergrad at Berkeley. But it certainly wasn't that at Davis, which I thought was what made it exceptional. There were so many people in my class who were really, really smart, but they didn't come with what I saw came of being really smart at the undergrad level, which was this arrogance or this detachment, the sort of walking around with this aloofness that these people are better than me or than the other people who are there, which was really cool to experience. And there was a lot of social interaction that I loved. We had a law school softball league where you split up and made your teams basically by year. So we had 2 teams per year, so 6 total teams. And it was awesome to just play softball on Fridays and hang out with your friends. And there wasn't this constant looking over the shoulder like, oh, should I be studying? I'm competing against these people. We have grade distribution. So if I don't get as high a grade as somebody over there on, who's playing third base, I'm gonna fall out of law school. There wasn't any of that. I felt like people were very ready, willing, and able to share notes, to try and study together, to share the experiences that worked for them, which made it a really great academic experience. It not only made me want to show up and learn and work hard and try and get the academic knowledge, the legal knowledge I needed to be successful on the bar exam and be a good lawyer, but it also just made me want to go to school. It reminded me of going to middle school and high school and just, hey, I get to hang out with my friends for like 4 to 5 hours a day, which was really awesome. And felt like I had the support of professors and administrators who were not trying to make things unnecessarily difficult just to say it was hard, but who were making it hard enough that it's challenging and also providing the resources you needed to be the best candidate you could be to get you to where you wanted to go. And that just made it such a fulfilling and rewarding academic experience, and one that I look back on and have really fond memories about.
Make it sound sweet, man. I'm trying to go to UC Davis now. But what do you think that the rigor of UC Berkeley's economics program kind of prepared you for that for law school, or do you think that it was kind of not as so related?
Absolutely. So
Mm.
I remember going into law school. So what I learned when I went to law school was a lot of people were there who had some prior experience or had some knowledge. They kind of knew people in the legal world. I was
Mm.
someone who my mom didn't have a college degree. She worked at a school district front office. My dad went to night school at an online college to eventually go back and be a middle school teacher in the inner city area ish. in Sacramento. So I didn't know any lawyers. I sure as hell did not work with any of them at any point. Growing up or into like college, a lot of people would do internships or whatever. Even if it's not a law firm, it's like legal adjacent. I had none of that, so I had no idea what to expect from law school. Hadn't talked to somebody who went to law school, didn't really know what it was like or what to expect. And um, I enroll, and people were like, it's really hard that first year. It's going to be like really crazy. You're gonna be up for like 13 hours a day. You're just going to be studying on the grind. You're going to have to just it's going to be a lot, man. It's going to be really, really tough. And I was
You're like,
like,
been there.
exactly right. So I actually started. I actually didn't do too hot in my first semester in law school. I underperformed and was ended up being below the median overall as a law student. And it honestly had less to do with the academic rigor and intensity and had more to do with the study habits.
Mm.
Being an economics major, everything was pencil paper for me. It was you're drawing lines on a chart, supply demand. You're doing math, and so you need to be able to do all of that. And for me, pedagogically, it helped to have a pencil in my hand. I get to law school and I'm the only person who's got a notebook, a spiral bound notebook, and a mechanical pencil my first week. And because I don't know what I'm doing and because I don't trust myself at this point being in law school, I'm like, so wait, I'm looking around. I'm like, do I get a laptop? Is that what I do? Do I need to download Microsoft OneNote? How do I do this? And so I pivoted away from what worked for me in undergrad that first semester and was trying to do stuff on my computer. I was trying to do what's called outlining in law school, which is a way of formulating and summarizing material for a class or for a lecture. And I tried to use that stuff, and it didn't really work when it came final time. And my second semester of law school, I decided I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do it my way. I'm going to bring my spiral bound notebook. I'm going to bring my mechanical pencil, and I'm just going to sit there and I'm going to take notes like I would, if I was in a labor econ course. And that really helped me. My second semester, I did much better, performed above the median, helped balance things out my first year. And it really did help me to feel like, okay, I know what works for me. And from an academic rigor perspective, I remember thinking this is hard, but this is not quite to the level of what I was experiencing at Berkeley in some of those, especially those major courses where it's 700 people, where I could barely talk to the professor, where I had to show up for office hours with a graduate student instructor who supplements the course. I felt like at Davis, even though the classes were challenging, professors were available. There were resources I could tap into that made it feel like as long as you're committing yourself to this year, as long as you're working hard to not just show up and take your notes, but to actually go home and digest them, try and read the cases. If it doesn't make sense, read it again. If that doesn't make sense, go to office hours, talk it through. If you're doing that, I personally felt like the amount of material was not so overwhelming that I felt like I couldn't get my work done. Certainly at times there were there were days, there were weeks, stretches where you're just like, I have 65 total pages to read for like one class or two classes, and it just feels like it's a lot to try and get done between a Tuesday and a Thursday. But I did feel like, given my experience at Berkeley, I just felt more comfortable, and I certainly feel like that. For me as a big sports fan, I think that's why professional teams look to players who play at those big conferences. They play in the Power Five, I guess now Power Four, just
Mm.
because there's a level of intensity and difficulty that you can see translating to the next level. And certainly for me, it made going to law school feel much more comfortable than maybe if I had gone to somewhere that wasn't quite as academically rigorous for undergrad. So certainly feel like it helped for sure. And to figuring out what worked for me and trusting that and saying, hey, this is what works for me. It might not be what everybody else does, but I'm going to try and do my thing and hope it works.
Commend you. And yeah, that sounds great. How when you decided to just lean on what you've always known, and when you decided to trust in yourself and your own methodology, and not really look to what other people were doing, things start to mesh and gel for you. So that's great. I think that's a common theme of today. Come back to what you know and what works for you individually, and just continue to work at that. So while you were in law school, you were on the litigation team and kind of competed against other universities. Is that the correct term for the team, or is it called something different?
Yeah, I did 2 extracurricular activity things my first year. Actually, one was my first year and another was my second year. The first year I did a thing, where you basically pretend to be a litigator, which is a lawyer who goes to court. You're arguing in front of a jury or a judge, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a criminal case. It can be a civil case, people who are just arguing about damages for, say, breach of contract, somebody who didn't do what they were supposed to do under a contract, and that's referred to as mock trial. Um, and that was a really illuminating experience because I'm sure everybody in the world has an experience where you try to do something and you're not just like not very good at it, but you're like, this doesn't make sense to me. I don't know what to do with my hands. For me, this is like physically, this is swimming. I cannot drown in water, but if you want me to beat anybody at a race in a pool, it's not happening. I don't know which my hands are supposed to cup somehow to like move extra water. I got like my arms are supposed to be in front of me, but then like also to the side and behind. I'm just like I don't know what I'm doing. It feels really hard. I've really got to work hard to figure this out. And for me, that was mock trial. I felt like I was working so hard to understand the facts of our fake case. I was really struggling to figure out how do I formulate arguments for our assigned position. And we were on teams, so I had a partner who was my quote co-counsel, and the two of us are going to argue the position for whatever the case was. And I felt like my partner just got it. It was just like, yeah, what do you mean? These are the facts that help with this particular cause of action that we're defending against. And for me, it just felt really, really challenging to put all those pieces together. And so I felt like I was in the swimming pool with like, I felt like I had floaties on and I had the kickboard, and I'm getting all the help I need from our assigned coaches and from my co-counsel, and it just felt really, really hard, which basically was a cue or a clue to me. Maybe we look at something else our second year, and maybe we don't do that again, and try something a little bit different. So my second year, I tried out and made a team that is focused more on not the in-court litigation, argue back and forth in front of a judge or a jury, but it's all about negotiation and compromise. So I was on what's called the negotiations team my second year in law school. And that's all about similar circumstances where you get a fact pattern and you're representing a certain side of the fact pattern. And your goal is to negotiate a deal with the other side that serves the interests of your assigned position, but also understands the other side's position and tries to come to some sort of an agreement. And for some reason, for reasons that I can't really articulate, that just clicked more for me. It just made more sense. And what was great about that experience is it did put me into we did actually go to Santa Clara and their law school and actually competed in a competition there. The American Bar Association has a negotiations competition, and so we went there and competed, and felt like we did a really decent job. Didn't actually advance out of the first round, if you will, but felt proud of what I was able to do and the work we put in to get there. And that just clicked a lot more. That made a lot more sense. And so as I went into the rest of my second and looked ahead to my third year of law school, I was like, whatever this is, I probably want to skew more in that direction as opposed to going to the traditional litigation, be in court, argue in court kind of route for a career. I was like, maybe this whole negotiation thing is maybe something I can look at. And in the legal world, we call that more of a transactional role than a litigation role. Those are kind of the two terms that separate the types of lawyers that people will be. Most lawyers will overlap and do some amount of both, but usually you have a primary lane. And so I was like, hey, this transactional stuff over here might be something I want to look at.
Nice. That kind of makes sense with the way that your career trajectory went after law school and all that stuff as well. So yeah, that's really interesting that you took both perspectives, got a little bit of experience in both lanes to see which one works for you and which one you are a little bit more suited to. So that's cool, man. I like the fact that you still got out there, you tried it, so saw that this may not be for me. This isn't my thing. I'm not really trying to drown in this pool. So let's move to a different sport. So I get you, man. And
Yeah.
when you first passed the bar and then you were working for Deloitte, was that your first job out of law school?
Yeah, it was. So as I got into my second and third year, like I said, the first year is really academically rigorous. You take a lot of courses that are super meaty. They're heavy. It's a lot of basic fundamental legal knowledge stuff. It's all the stuff you would imagine is your basic criminal law. Think Law and Order. It's your basic contracts stuff. It's your torts, which are things like battery, assault, or the nuisance or sorry negligence sort of stuff. That's all your first year, kind of basic fundamental stuff for the legal world. Your second and third year, you get to take a lot more coursework that interests you. And for me, one of those things was tax. So I was told by a lot of people, hey, one of the first courses you should take when you have a chance is federal income tax, because law very often overlaps on the business side. And if you're going to work for clients, they want to know that you have some aptitude, some knowledge and understanding of how money works, because you can give great legal advice, but if it disregards entirely a business model for your client, they're going to retain you probably once and not again. So I was encouraged to take federal income tax as a way to basically show on my resume that, hey, aside from my economics degree, I'm not one of these people who can just read and write. I actually understand a little bit of math, very basic math, and I understand some fundamentals of how taxes work. And at a super high level, just being cognizant of the fact that money matters in a lot of business settings. And I take that class and absolutely love it. The way I explain it is, when I was in high school, I took Spanish, and I went about as far as you could go in high school, taking Spanish. And it was one of those classes that just clicked. I cannot explain why, but it just did. It was easy for me to learn the new material, to memorize the words, to put the sentence structures together. I had an easy time conjugating verbs. It was a super easy class that, compared to geometry, I was like, can we just take Spanish for like the whole day? Is that an option? Can I do that? Can I just not take geometry? And for me in law school, tax was the similar. It was similar to Spanish for me in high school, where in law school I'm taking federal income tax and it just clicks. Everything makes a lot of sense. I realized that it really started to push me. I really started to get pushed in that direction when I started to take more tax classes with my friends and realize I'm the one who's like helping outside of class. I'm like explaining the concepts to my friends and like, oh yeah, here's why you want to do this, or here's why we don't depreciate that. And it was like, okay, hey, maybe this is a lane. Maybe unlike a swimming pool, where maybe now we're playing basketball for me, which is a little bit more suited for my skill set. Um, and that's really what encouraged me to try and pursue opportunities in tax. I was also someone who got told a lot about big law. And for people who don't know what that is, it's basically your quintessential suits version of working at a law firm. It is super intense, working a ton of hours. You're working for the Fortune 100 companies in the world, everything super pressure intense. And that just did not sound appetizing to me at all. It doesn't fit from a personality perspective for me. And although I was certainly motivated to make a good paycheck, I wasn't willing to sacrifice watching football on Sundays to go into the office, because that's what was demanded of you at that level. So as I'm looking forward to the end of my law school career and at opportunities in the professional space, I was told, hey, the tax world gives you a lot better balance. You're not going to get paid as well, but you're going to be able to leave at reasonable times. You're going to have your weekends off. So go look at that, and ultimately go to interview on campus for a few of the big four firms, Deloitte, Ernst & Young, and really liked the experience that I had. I loved the overlap of being able to apply my economics knowledge to the legal world and try and answer some legal questions by using some math. Again, very basic math, but we're using it nonetheless. That just felt like a really cool environment for me. And then from a personality perspective, matched up with a lot of the people in that space. So I end up getting an offer from Deloitte and thought, hey, this is awesome. I think this is a great place for me to be. Had to have my start date delayed by the pesky pandemic, but once we got started, I felt like it was a good role. I learned a lot in the short time I was there, But yeah, that was definitely the route I needed to go, and I'm grateful that I avoided the big law world right out of law school.
Nice. So you didn't want to be like Mike and Harvey, man, just grinding it out on the all-nighters, dude.
Uh, I mean, I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure Harvey had like a Michael Jordan autographed basketball that's like behind his desk, and I was like, actually, that seems kind of cool. I'm sure he can afford like courtside seats or maybe a box or something. I was like, that sounds great. But I was someone who talked to enough people while I was in law school to learn that the trade off of the extra money and getting the perks of being in that sort of position, they're awesome. You get a lot for what it is, but I just wasn't willing to sacrifice the time, and that really just made the decision somewhat easy for me. Seeing what a lot of people told me about the the health impacts, a lot of people stopped working out, they stopped eating well because they were just constantly in front of their desk. They had to be up from 7 a.m. until 11 p.m. working on stuff, and then they just go home and pass out for 5 hours and then get up and do it again. I was sitting there thinking, even if you have all the money in the world, does it really matter if I'm chained to my desk Monday through Saturday and for half of Sunday? And for me, the answer was no, because when I had just left undergrad, my first job that I had mentioned, working at that consultancy in San Francisco, it was somewhat similar. There was a big demand on time, and I realized, man, I don't even get to experience San Francisco. This is pretty lame. I'm making an okay paycheck, but I don't have any time in the world to do the things I like. And for me, that trade off just wasn't worth it.
I mean, at the end of the day, what are you optimizing for? I think there are people out there who are like, I'm not really a family person, and I just want to grind it out and be at the top of my field, that's a path where people like that are gonna shine. But then there's other people who are like, I'd like to have a family someday. I'd like to experience a little bit something more outside of the office, and so folks who have that path need a little bit more of a well-rounded life and doesn't have everything that centers around this. So. I'm just glad that you came back to a little bit more of that knowledge itself and didn't put yourself in a position because I've seen not personally, but just from interviews of folks who were lawyers for a long period of time in big law, or folks who are at the top of their field and maybe like a business consulting firm or something like that, and they're grinding it out every day, and then they come to a point where they realize, oh well, all the things that I thought I wanted in life, I've accomplished, and it's kind of unfulfilling, and there's more to this, and now it's kind of too late because I've dedicated all my all the time that I would spend looking for a partner or trying to start a family, just grinding it out, and now I have all these accomplishments and accolades, but nothing to really pass that on to, or nothing, no one to share that with. And so I think it's some people enjoy that life, and power to them, but I commend you for realizing yourself that you want a little something more and a little bit more rounded life for yourself.
Yeah. When I was in high school in particular, I remember just being super insecure and just always looking around at everybody else, my friends, the popular kids, to figure out what I should do, what should I wear. I should go be on the football team because that's what the cool guys do. And then I get out there and I'm like 135 pounds soaking wet as a sophomore in high school, and I'm afraid to get hit. I don't want to get hit by these guys. I don't want to be here.
Yeah.
But I was so insecure, and looking at other people to tell me what to do and how to do it, that I was willing to basically just follow what everybody else was doing. And as with age and going through a maturation process, I think a lot of people learn to just look introspectively at themselves and ask themselves, what do I want, and what version of my life do I want to live? And I will admit, in law school, it can be one track minded. There can be a lot of people who will tell you, if you want to succeed, you have to do this, this, and this. You have to be on a mock trial team. You have to do moot court, which is basically mock trial, but at the appeals level. It's a little more cerebral. It's a little more academic. You got to do
Mhm.
that. You then have to go work at a big law firm or clerk for some big judge. And if you don't do that, your career is going to be terrible. And I think if you buy into that, then you're going to end up trying out for the football team in high school and realize that you just don't fit in. And you can certainly go through the motions and do that, and it gives you great opportunities professionally to pivot. But there are a lot of people who get used to a lifestyle, or like to be in those environments, but they neglect a lot of other things in their life. And for me, being introspective about it, I, I came to accept that maybe I was one of those people who didn't care first, foremost, primarily, and only about being a great lawyer. That when I talked to other people, when I met new people, when I checked in with my friends, I didn't want to talk about cases I was working on. I didn't want to talk about the big clients that I was representing or any of that stuff. It just, I was like, I honestly kind of just want to talk about Caitlin Clark getting drafted. I want to talk about the Mavs Wolves Western Conference Final Series. I want to talk about going up to Tahoe this summer for the celebrity golf tournament. I'm like, I want to do all these other things. And I saw for a number of my law school peers that there were just different motivations. And I was like, hey, if that's you staying true, authentic to yourself about what you're going after, you want to be on the cutting edge of intellectual property law, which is awesome, then great, man, go after that, do that. Be exceptional at that because that's what motivates you. And I think for me, there was some relief in realizing at some point that I could decide that I wanted to do something else and that was okay. And that didn't mean I was failing. It didn't mean that I wasn't good enough. Could I have gotten the big law jobs? I don't know. I probably wasn't the best candidate. I didn't have the top grades. So I'm probably not getting those offers anyway. But I think if you tell yourself that there's only one way to live, there's only one way to succeed, that you set yourself up for like an infinite level of disappointment. And certainly the legal world is not a profession where, it's not baseball. Where if you don't make it to the majors, it can be a real slog. There are plenty of jobs out there in the legal world where you can make a good amount of money. You can pay your bills. You can live a comfortable lifestyle and still enjoy your weekends and your time off and dinners with your family on a Thursday night. So relying on myself and trusting that, hey, I don't have to do that one particular route to get where I want to go, and to prioritize correctly, I think really made all the difference in the world for me.
Nice. Well, that's great. I think even it's interesting, like there's been jobs that I've had that I didn't even know existed. And so I feel like you just really never know what's out there and putting yourself in a box and limiting yourself to this particular into this particular pathway may be limiting in a lot of spaces. Obviously I like to have a plan, a particular place where I'm going, but I'm always open to the change, always open to what may come because you never know how you can be put in a better position. In my last job, I was trying to structure it more so to be a little bit more flexible because I was working a lot of hours. So I was like, oh, at my next promotion aspect, I think what I'm gonna do is just try to structure the job a little bit differently. Instead of getting such a substantial pay bump, let's try to peel back the hours a little bit and like negotiate from that standpoint. But then I ended up getting an offer from a different job that checked all the boxes of the flexibility that I wanted. And then so it was like, oh, okay, because I was open to doing something different, then that door was open for me. And so I think, if you leave yourself open to that and you're still keeping your eyes open for what may come and what opportunities are out there for you, then things can still work out. And so
100%.
can you walk me through your kind of your career path? Because so after you left Deloitte, and can you kind of walk me through the mindset behind that? What was kind of the decision process between deciding to leave there?
Yeah, for sure. So I started at Deloitte post, um, I guess the first wave of the pandemic. So I started January 21, and I worked there for a pretty short amount of time. Ended up leaving because the team that I worked for was based in San Francisco and Sacramento. So I was assigned to the Sacramento office. At this point, a lot of people were still working in a hybrid environment. So I was half working from home, and at this point, there were still pretty significant restrictions as far as working in person. So I went into the office very infrequently in Sacramento. But my whole team that I was assigned to, which was primarily comprised of lawyers, was based in San Francisco and Sacramento. And my girlfriend ended up getting placed at UCLA for her medical residency. And I brought that information to my team, and they told me, hey, you can certainly stay at Deloitte. It's a huge company. We got lots of offices. We have a couple different offices in LA, but they told me that I was going to have a hard time staying on their team or at least working directly with the team because they could no longer have as much oversight over what I was doing. When you're assigned to a different office, it seemed like I was going to be assigned to somebody else as a boss or have like a different leadership structure thing. And for me, that really impacted whether or not I wanted to stay. I had not only heard some less than glowing things about one of the LA offices that I was most likely to go to, but it was also, hey, if I'm not going to be on a team of lawyers, I'm not qualified to be an accountant. I don't have my CPA license. Didn't take accounting in undergrad, and I don't think I'm in a position to transition to that kind of role. And so for me, it was one of those things that was like, hey, maybe I need to look in a different direction. And for me, there was, okay, do I try and find something new in the tax space, or what does that look like? And honestly, it was pretty challenging because at that time we were still in the middle of a pandemic that I think had a lot of people hesitating to bring on brand new employees that you had to onboard entirely remotely. And so I ended up applying for a bunch of more traditional legal jobs in Los Angeles. The struggle was for someone who didn't have a full year of work experience, and especially less than a year of work experience at not a law firm. A lot of law firms were not really interested in even interviewing me. So that made it really, really tough to try and find something. And I didn't really want to try and go to a new Big Four accounting firm because I was like, well, this is kind of just, I would be doing the same thing that I was at Deloitte, except I don't really think that I like the environment as much. If I go down there, I'm not going to have any relationships with anyone in those offices. And I had grown a little bit fatigued of the tax world because, as fun as the esoteric discussions were in law school, the practical reality of a job in tax was a lot different than what I got in the lecture hall. So that comboed with the fact that I wouldn't be able to stay with my team at Deloitte if I moved, or very low likelihood that I would. I decided to just shop around and see what I could find, and ended up finding the firm that I'm currently with, who works in the real estate space and has a pretty niche position in the real estate legal space, working with common interest developments, which are basically homeowners associations. And what's awesome is that I felt like from the jump, I was able to do some legal work, but I saw immediately that there was a work life balance that I was looking for. I felt like the people I was working with were not the typical lawyers from suits that are a little bit stuck up and maybe have that highfalutin lifestyle. That just wasn't the vibe that I got, and loved that sense of community at that kind of law firm. So was grateful to find the role, and was thankful that they decided to take a chance on me.
And then so when you work at that law firm, you worked there for a while, about a year or so, and then end up transitioning to where you're at now. So can you tell me a little bit more about the law firm, how that experience was, and then where you're at currently?
Yeah, I mean, I bounced around when I was down here as well, which a lot of people would tell you not to do, and I would just, I would say it taught me a lot. I had to go through the experience that I went through. So I started at firm one in Los Angeles when I moved down here with my girlfriend for her residency. I
Mhm.
worked there for about a year. I had the thought that, hey, maybe this is too limiting. The firm
Mhm.
is too niche. I'm not getting enough broad experience, and I'm only a basically second year attorney. I kind of want to see more stuff, because if I don't see it now, I'm going to be really pigeonholed. I'm going to be
Yeah.
stuck doing one thing. So I then go and apply for interview and get signed on at this larger law firm that does a much broader scope of work in the real estate space, and what I would label as a more, in air quotes, traditional real estate legal practice, which was buying and selling commercial properties, helping with leases for commercial properties, restructuring debt for commercial properties. And that experience was valuable because I realized that I hated it. And it was basically the big law adjacent job that I had avoided doing. And I took it because I found myself asking questions when I was at firm one in Los Angeles. So I was like, do I want to be at a place like that? I don't feel like this firm one I'm at right now is really like I don't I'm maybe I'm not being challenged enough academically or pedagogically. I just feel like I'm not learning a ton. It seems super niche. If I don't learn something else now, I'm going to be stuck in this. And so I decide, okay, I'm going to go to firm two, and was certainly broader in scope, but I realized I just didn't even like the work. The work we were doing was not interesting to me. It wasn't stimulating. It wasn't challenging. It was very tedious is the way I would describe it. I'm taking these giant documents and I'm proofreading them, and certainly not trying to say that that is below me necessarily, but I didn't even like the broader work that we were doing. I felt like I was just helping rich people who form LLCs buy commercial property. And for me, that just wasn't really, not only was the work not exciting, but I just didn't feel like I was doing much with my day to day, to be honest. And then although the pay was great, it came back to the reality of, hey, what is the trade-off here? The trade-off was I had a partner who was expecting me to be on the phone with her at 11:30 p.m. because some documents came in. And I was just like, hey man, this is not what I want to do. This is not how I want to work. This isn't how I want to live. This isn't the balance I want. So being there for not even a year, I reached back out to my old firm one, and I'm like, hey, so what if I like hated this move? What are the opportunities for me to come back? And thankfully, they were more than willing to bring me back on, and have been there ever since. And am infinitely grateful to have gone through the experience I did to realize, hey, whatever questions I was asking myself about what I wanted professionally, I answered those. I don't have to wonder, as I move forward in my career, if I should take that job at the big firm, that comes with the paycheck and the prestige and maybe the corner office or anything like that. I was like, hey, I answered that question for myself, and I'm glad I did because it gives me the security and the comfort to know that I can chart my own path, and I'm going to be okay with that.
Yeah, that's great. So so now you're back doing real estate law once again. Yeah. And so I remember you were telling me your clientele are kind of like building owners or different places like that. Can you kind of explain the scope of that work and how that how you like that space?
Yeah. So the firm does a full service spectrum or offers a full service spectrum of real estate and business services. The primary clientele are common interest developments. Those are homeowners associations or commercial associations. What that looks like is let's say there's a community of residential homes on a golf course, and you got to drive through some security gate at the front of the golf course, and you follow all the streets inside the gates, to your friend's house or whatever. So all those homes are very likely in what's called a common interest development. Essentially, what that means is that we're all pooling money together. We pay dues, HOA dues, every month. And that goes to fund things that we share. It could be a golf course, it could be a pool, it could be a spa, it could be a fitness center, it could be the roads that we drive on, it could be the sidewalks. Maybe there's a park in there. And my law firm basically helps those associations navigate their day to day. So I help people draft contracts to retain vendors who service the landscaping there. So we draft contracts to make sure that, hey, you're going to have this schedule as far as landscaping. Here's the price that it's going to be. Here are all the legal terms we need to protect the association should there be a dispute or a lawsuit. We also help with the underlying, what are called governing documents. Those are pieces of legal work that essentially outline how the association is going to function. The association is analogous to a corporation. It's similar to like an Amazon or a Google, where there's going to be a board, there's going to be a group of people who make decisions. So we need to have bylaws for that organization that tell it how to operate and how to run. when it makes decisions. We also need restrictions on how people use the property. So, for example, I need to make sure that if you and I live in one of these common interest developments on the golf course, we need to have a rule that says, hey, you can't drive your car on the golf course.
Mm.
And so our office helps draft those kinds of documents. We also help interpret them and analyze them if there's a dispute or if we need to otherwise help the association navigate a challenge with those documents. That's I think, an overview of probably 70 to 80% of the work I do. The other 20-ish%, 20 to 30% is a bunch of hodgepodge different stuff, help with some real estate financing stuff. So it's pretty similar to what I was doing before, just on a smaller scale. So instead of commercial properties with $10 million to $15 million worth of asset value, we're talking a loan for $1 million to help finance some major construction project that the association is undertaking. So a little bit different, but what's interesting is it's a lot of the same mechanics. So from a from a work product perspective, you're producing many of the same documents. You're just doing it at a smaller scale.
And just kind of wrapping up on your legal experience and your professional experience and all that stuff. So when you became a lawyer, what's one of the preconceived notions that you had going into this career field that you've kind of like gone away from or been disillusioned of since working?
Yeah. Um, I would say the biggest one is that everyone is a jerk. I think there's this idea that you want your lawyer to be this super zealous, intense, crazy, uncompromising person, and quite honestly, that's just not what you see. And quite frankly, those people suck. When you work on the other side from those people, you're like, ugh, I don't want to work with you. I don't want to make a deal with you. I don't want to figure this out. You're annoying. You're making this job more difficult for me. You're making it more difficult for our support staff, and I just don't want to deal with this. And what's great is I feel like that is one out of 100 attorneys, at least in my space. I think most people understand that the way you perform good legal work is trying to find a compromise. At the end of the day, so often lawyers are involved when there's a dispute. So the the goal of a lawyer is not necessarily to recover and recover under all circumstances. Very often you have an ongoing relationship with the parties involved who have the dispute. So you need to be amenable to a longer relationship. So that doesn't mean, from a game theory perspective, that you end the game and that we try and get as much as we can by making everything so difficult and everybody else. At the end of the day, the goal in representing your client as zealously as you can doesn't necessarily mean you have to be a jerk. And the cool thing was that in some ways I thought, oh gosh, okay, you get into this profession and people are like expecting you to be this really intense, crazy advocate who is just uncompromising in all circumstances. And what's awesome is I feel like I don't have to take on that role, and I feel like so many attorneys that are on the other side when I work with them are not in that role. They're more than willing and happy to try and figure out a solution. And that I think is awesome. That for people who may not think from a personality perspective, they have the right demeanor and the right personality type to be a lawyer. I'm like, nah, that's, you can dispense with that. There's more than one way to do this job. Similar to how Nikola Jokic on the Nuggets looks, he doesn't look super athletic. He's not ripped. He can't jump out of the gym, but he's one of the best basketball players in the world. So if you're someone who's a little more quiet, reserved, you're not super confrontational, you think maybe I can't be a lawyer because that's what I see on TV. I got to be, I've got to be doing the law and order stuff. No, you can be a version of yourself and still be really successful as a lawyer. So just dispense with those notions or ideas that there's one way to do it, because you can be a good person and be a good lawyer too at the same time.
Nice. That's great. I think that's a great place for us to end. I think a lot of people can gain some great insights from what you shared today, both on your academic pathway and get an idea of where they can kind of ascend to, just as well as the insight into your professional life. I think it's not a very what in people's mind is a traditional attorney pathway or traditional attorney job prospects that they take. And so it's really great to hear your unfolding of your career and how everything has pretty much panned out, but in such a specific way that's around your personality type, the wants and needs that you have, around the relationship that you have and that you're building. So that's a great and beautiful thing, and I appreciate you for being on Views from the Mountaintop.
Appreciate you, man. Thanks for having me on. This was a blast. Happy to do it. Had a lot of fun doing it. So I hope there's another opportunity in the future.
Likewise, I got you. I got you.
Appreciate you, man. See ya.
Yep. See you.